So the next event in Brave New World is the Roundtable and exhibition Ways of Listening, curated by the architecture collective Assemble. I'm not sure that Assemble needs an introduction. They're the first architecture practice to win the Turner Prize 3 years ago. Their work, like the work of some of the other architects we'll be seeing this year, ventures beyond the traditional role of the architect. Assemble is in fact composed of architects, artists, designers, and graduates in psychology and literature. Their working methods are characterized by a hands-on, craftsmanlike and collaborative approach. For example, the workshop and performance space for the experimental music venue Café Otto, featured in the show, was built with the rubble found on site and constructed with the help of collaborators and volunteers. The exhibition focuses on the way Assemble works with volunteers and collaborators and residents. Their testimonies, drawings, poems and essays are exhibited in the show. As a resident at Granby 4 Streets Road, Assemble listened and looked and saw and thought and helped us bring a street back to life. Granby 4 Streets also exhibited as an ongoing collaboration with residents in North Liverpool to challenge oppressive planning initiatives through rebuilding housing and public space, as well as providing employment through the Granby Workshop, a community-orientated manufacturer of architectural ceramics whose products have been used in the local renovations. The way that this generation is committing to socially engaged projects is another of the themes, again seen in Baltic Street Adventure Playground, the third work exhibited. Assemble created a permanent child-led space where children can play freely in Dalmarnock, East Glasgow. 2 young practices are about to take part in a discussion with Fran Edgerley and Audrey Thomas Hayes from Assemble. Simone Capra from stARTT and Stefano Ragazzo from Orizzontale will draw parallels to the work of Italian architects and the political and economic situation in Italy. Finally, as always, we would like to thank all those who make the architecture programme possible. Brave New World is co-sponsored by Alford Hall, Monningham Morris, Bennett's Associates, the Marcus Trust, Eric Perry Architects and the John Cohen Foundation, with additional support from Jamie Feldbert Architects, the Brian Guinness Charitable Trust and Carmody Groag.
Allora, buonasera, benvenuti a tutti quanti. Io sono Steve Meon, il direttore dell'Accademia Britannica. Ti do un caloroso benvenuto questa sera alla terza tappa, non terza, quarta, del programma di Marina Brave New World. So I hope you all have your hymn books with you for this evening's event. So it's a tremendous honour to welcome Assemble here this evening, who in many ways embody the kind of collaborative thing that we try and do ourselves in working together in an interdisciplinary way to be kind of creative and impactful, if not with quite the same stellar recognition that they have received. I'm going to bring on Paul Sellers, who is Director of the British Council here and is co-supporting this evening's event together with the British School in Rome, after which Simone Capra, from the Director of stARTT, is going to do a brief introduction to Assemble themselves, as it were, prior to their actual interventions. So thank you all very much for coming this evening. I hope you enjoy. We will have a little reception afterwards, and then the gallery will be open to view the installation and mix and discuss. And then there's also the reception afterwards at the British Council as from 9. So for those of you who are going to that as well, if you need details about how to get there, please ask me later. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Paul now, just say a few words before Simona, and buona serata a tutti quanti. Grazie.
Good evening, everybody. Stephen, thank you very much. I'm deeply honoured to be given a slot in the British School at Rome. I'm playing away, as it were. I'm with the British Council, which is over the other side of Villa Borghese, but we hope to see many of you there later on tonight. So just a few words before the event starts. I'd like to give my thanks and congratulations to Marina Engel for curating this wonderful series. Really excellent. Thank you very much. And the British Council is very proud to be partnering with you here. Indeed, this event forms part of a series which we call the UK-Italy Partners for Culture, which started last year in the autumn. It's going on this year, this autumn, and will continue next year and the year after until 2020, ladies and gentlemen. Save the date, save the entire year, in fact, for the UK-Italy Year of Culture 2020, which you'll all be invited to participate in. The other big news is that we're on the cusp of drafting a memorandum of understanding between the British government and the Italian government on cultural relations, cultural heritage protection and other fields, which is really exciting. So in these troubled times, there is a future ahead of us. Great to see our colleagues from Assemble here, wonderful young we're going to say emerging, but I think you're pretty much emerged after starring at the Turner Prize in 2015 and other fantastic shows. So we're looking forward to seeing the exhibition tonight, and indeed for our Italian colleagues and Simone, and for being with us and helping us with the chairing. So, and Stefano, excuse me. So, ladies and gentlemen, enough from me. Enjoy. See you later. Thank you.
Hello, good evening everybody. I'm very happy to stay here with you, thanks to the British Council and the British School at Rome. Thanks to Marina to invite me. Marina, she's the curator of architecture program here. So the project Brave New World, New Vision in Architecture. I'm very happy to stay here because I know the work of Assemble since several years. I'm very interested in his works, their works. I'm very happy to introduce also Fran, Edgerley, and Audrey, Thomas. Hi, they're here. Please, if you want to stay here a little bit with us, with me. Thanks. So, thanks to be here, Rome. So few words to present them. I consider your collective one of the more interesting UK-based practice in architecture and art, and not only upcoming, but they're one of the more interesting because they are a wide range of interests, and they have won in 2015 the Turner Prize. Some of their projects, like the Cineroleum, the Yard House, has been some very interesting projects highlighted from the architecture and art magazine all over the world. And I like a lot the folly for a flyer beneath the highway. And their structure, it reflects this wide system of practices and the system of involvement of your collective into several projects touching art, public space, ephemeral works, reflect also, and this is very interesting to us, the structure of your practice. They are not architects. Some of them, they explained me, they're becoming architects. They study, a lot of them studied architecture. But Fran studied philosophy, physiology, and psychology. And Audrey studied fashion and curatorship, right? Okay, thanks. And so it is not only speaking about how to realize a space, but also what is the intellectual engagement in between space and other disciplines. So they are interesting to us because political commitment, collaborative design, and this capability to cross different disciplines and different fields, merging together art and social responsibility. But differently from other practice, other office of architecture that have a sort of aesthetic of poorness, what they are very interesting to us because they are able to combine together intellectual engagement, art approach, investigation of the space with a low-cost construction. Okay, maybe I can start to shut up and give the microphone to you. Here with us, I'm going to present later, there's also Stefano Ragazzo from Orizzontale, he is the discussant. And then we have a live performance at the end of this meeting by Ute, I hope to pronounce right the surnames, Ute Kangisser and Daniel Blumberg. They're introducing your show after this talk. Thanks to be here. We are going to further discuss their work in the roundtable after your presentation. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Simone, for a very kind introduction. I'm Audrey, this is Fran. We have a lot of slides. We're going to try not to talk too much because, it's probably far more interesting to have a conversation, but we wanted to give quite a sort of comprehensive overview of what assembly we do, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of kind of the types of work we do, which is quite varied, really. So we're a collective of about 17 people, kind of varies depending on who you talk to and when. But basically, it's a group that's been working since 2010, largely the same group of people with a couple of extras, including me, who've come on more recently. It's a collective that works across, of course, architecture, design, and art. So we do a whole range of things. I don't know, do you want to be in the driver's seat, Fran? You can keep the pace. So we do public built projects. This is a very exciting project for us, Goldsmiths Centre for Contemporary Art, which just opened. So it's a public permanent built project. And then, Fran, these are a few views. Then this is another built permanent project, which is a tasting room for a brewery in Japan. This is the courtyard of VAC Venice, which is a new gallery there, which we've landscaped the courtyard for. And we do residential work, so these are the houses we refurbished in Granby, Liverpool. We also do development projects. The most significant of those being Sugar House Studios, which is in its second iteration. So this is where we work, but we also have lots of tenants who are our collaborators, so people working in all sorts of mediums. And that's a nice sort of drawing of what we hope for at Sugar House. We also establish organisations, so there's quite a lot of different things we've done, but perhaps one of the more notable ones is Black Horse Workshop, which is a makerspace. And there's a few images of this here. It also has a bakery. We also manufacture things, so we made the prototype for and designed this chair for the Goldsmiths Gallery. We have also made toilets with Armitage Shanks. This is a slipcast toilet. And we also established Granby Workshop, who's an architectural ceramics workshop. So this was founded via the Turner Prize. So they make loads of stuff. We also do construction. So we built Yard House, which Simone mentioned. So this is the structure. And then these are the colourful tiles. You may or may not be familiar with them. So this is an affordable workspace that we built at the old Sugar House. We also do events and programming. and and yeah, there's a few photos. We also do a bit of publishing, so books, but we also have made films, and we're making a radio program at the moment for Radio 4, so keep a lookout for that. And we also make exhibitions, as you may have guessed. So this exhibition coming up on screen, Fran. This is a Lena Bobardi exhibition, and we've also done the Brutalist Playground, which is it's actually foam, so it's an interactive exhibition. We also have historically done a lot of temporary sort of self-initiated built projects, which sort of leads us on to the next section. So temporary theatres, and as Simone mentioned, the Folly for a Flyover, which was under an underpass, and then the Cineroleum, which was the sort of project that made Assemble. But I'll pass on to Fran now to tell you a little bit more.
Yeah, so that was just a really quick run through of the kind of scope and scale at which we work. Really, we started as just a kind of loose group of friends who, mainly people who studied architecture together, and the first priority was to kind of collectively make something happen and then to learn through doing that, which then only incidentally created an organisation, which main purpose was to continue to be able to do that. So the practice has really evolved based on no particular agenda, but has been formed by the kind of conditions that we saw had value in that first project, the Cineroleum. So that's kind of led to a way of working that tries to understand the gap between the people who inhabit a city and the forces that govern how it's made. So working with open construction processes, creating organisations and ways of having access to affect change in people's environment. Also self-build projects, working with models, trying to understand space through experiencing it at a larger scale. Testing out ideas and construction details through one-to-one prototyping, experimenting with material processes. This is some ceramics we developed in a project, in the Japanese project Audrey showed earlier, using a kind of yeast glaze. So this kind of patina is a kind of a raku effect. And also, yeah, I guess just trying to develop a practice that really serves to nurture exchange and conversation. So kind of space of mutual support, and it's really this kind of ongoing balancing act between individual interests and collective responsibility to one another. And this is trying to really acknowledge everyone's values, because everyone's value and knowledge and lived experience, because everyone has quite a different set of interests. Even within those who studied architecture, there's obviously an incredibly broad subject, and so to try and evolve structures that can allow for those different kinds of knowledges to have parity, both within the practice and also when we collaborate with people on different projects. So these two images is this kind of like resourcing board, I guess we have, where the projects are worked on by generally like 2 buddies each, and they kind of lead on development of projects. And then we have kind of weekly meetings when the broader collective can have input into the way things are being developed. And another critical piece of infrastructure is the lunch rota, which we organise at the beginning of every week, and we take it in turns to cook a meal for each other. And that also evolved out of the kind of beginnings of self-build projects, which are self-initiated, and in order to sustain any activity on site, it was really fundamental that we ate well. And so these kind of strands of supporting one another in like collective social activity is something that we're like trying to address in new ways. Particularly now we're also trying to earn a living from it, which is like obviously has some kind of tension with that. But we're going to introduce the exhibition, and then also talk a little bit more about 3 particular projects that the exhibition focuses on.
Cool, thanks, Fran. To give a little bit of context to the exhibition, which is called Ways of Listening, basically we were approached by Marina to curate an exhibition as part of the Brave New World program. And Fran and I were particularly excited by the opportunity. We have a sort of system whereby you can express interest for working in a particular project, and we were up for taking it on. And it was a great opportunity because Marina was very open to what we might present. So we thought, well, what a great opportunity to do what we want, in a way, within reason. And Fran and I think have quite similar interests in the practice, in a way, she might argue, but we have some overlap, I think. We're both quite interested in the social aspect of projects. So we thought what is quite interesting about Assemble is we have some projects which we haven't really been able to let go of. We have a sort of ongoing relationship to them. So we thought, well, what a good opportunity to reflect on those projects, but rather than us talk about it as we always do, perhaps try to present the projects from the people who sustain those projects day to day, so residents or people who are working as part of the projects, people who have helped build them, that sort of thing. So we have presented 3 UK-based longer-term ongoing projects. One of them is an adventure playground in Scotland for children who are 6 to 12. One of them is a music project space in Dalston, London, and the other one is Granby 4th Street. So it's a number of projects within a project, in a way. So the exhibition features contributions from residents, as I said, and people who use, maintain, support the projects, people who've helped develop them and build them. So we've got video, audio, writing, poems, artworks, outcomes from workshops, and also tonight we're very fortunate to have some performances from people who are involved in the Otto project space. So I guess now we'll just talk a little bit more about those 3 projects.
Yeah, so Otto happened, we were approached by Hamish, who runs Cafe Otto. It's an experimental music venue in Dalston in East London, and he had this access to this site, which Hackney Council wasn't going to be developing because it had a kind of special designation because potentially it could have been the site for an air vent for a new Crossrail train line that was going to be running underneath it. And Otto has like a very committed community of fans and people who visit the cafe and attend their program. But we had very limited budget, so we were trying to think about ways in which we could use the resource of the site, which was just essentially rubble and earth, and this kind of willing labour to create a structure. So we developed a kind of sandbag construction system, which meant that it had a lot of tolerance for people to get involved with because they didn't need to have necessarily any prior experience in construction. We used the earth that was on site and kind of sifted out the larger pieces of rubble, compacted the bags, and used those larger pieces then to kind of render the outside in what we called rubble dash, as kind of bad joke. And it really is quite a strange looking thing. It doesn't, it looks like it's kind of grown from the site and has this kind of provenance, material provenance, because of the fact that it is the same material substance. It was kind of an exercise in form that was determined wholly by the kind of construction process. So in terms of the regularity of the buttresses and the kind of scale of the space was about the kind of the structural capacity of that construction method. And yeah, it's been running now, it's been used for about 5.5 years, almost 6 years. And it's used at least once a day by a really amazing mix of musicians and artists. And it was really those people who helped to build the space as well that a number of them now also use the space regularly and edit it and continue to help it to evolve to meet their needs. And I guess it's kind of been a process of mutual exchange between the building and the community who use it, which it has helped to kind of give some solidity to, because it's a free space to access for them. And that's a really rare occurrence in London. So it's enabled a kind of looseness and freedom in their practices, which maybe wouldn't have been able to happen if that space hadn't had existed. Yeah, that's what I want to say about that one.
Thanks, Fran. And then the second project is Granby 4 Streets, which I just briefly touched on before. So Granby 4 Streets refers to 4 streets in Granby in Liverpool. So for Assemble, it's really a number of projects within a project. But just to say that it didn't evolve, it evolved out of, it's very much a collaboration, so it's not something we have authored by ourselves by any means. So basically, just to give a little bit of context, as a result of quite a few decades of regeneration initiatives, this community in Granby, which was once very much thriving, was left largely demolished. And there were these 4 remaining streets, Granby 4 streets, which were left as a result of that regeneration quite sparsely populated and down to the sort of dereliction of them. So there was a very resourceful group of residents who were pretty much fundamental to bringing the streets out of dereliction. So they committed to planting, painting, some quite, in a way, I would say friendly political action, and they basically campaigned to reclaim the streets over quite a long period of time. So in 2011 they entered into an innovative form of community land ownership. So they established the Granby 4 Streets Community Land Trust, which has allowed them to bring empty homes back into affordable housing. And they approached Assemble to ask Assemble to create a sort of like strategic vision, a propositional area study that built upon all the hard work they'd already done. So as a result of that study, Assemble have realised quite a few projects in collaboration with the Granby 4 Street CLT. So we refurbished 10 houses on Cairns Street. And that's what that nice interior was there. This is the sort of messy work that happened during, which was lots of sort of casting of fireplaces, which were made from rubble on the site. And you can see there as well, there's some door handles, which were also similarly made in the area. So it was via this project. I always like to say with Assemble that sort of one thing leads to another, one thing sort of enables the next thing. So as you may or may not be familiar with, Assemble used the Turner Prize nomination and subsequent win to launch Granby Workshop. So Granby Workshop made all those beautiful sort of products you can see in the houses, and now functions as its own standalone business, and they produce these amazing tiles in collaboration with Assemble for the Venice Biennale this year, which hopefully you might have seen. And then following on that, this is one of the houses on Cairns Street, but it was pretty badly damaged, so Assemble decided instead of trying to make it into a house, why not make it into a community resource, so a winter garden. So this is still very much ongoing. It's getting there. We planted the trees inside a couple of weeks ago, which was a really nice moment, but still going. But it's going to have an artist residence space in there as well. And of course we have hopefully some other projects in Granby on the horizon, but funding and other variables reliant. Cool.
Yeah, and then the final project is Baltic Street, which actually originally evolved out of a public art commission, which was associated with the Commonwealth Games. So this was a kind of piece of public money that was meant to be invested on the kind of outskirts of this new stadium, the Chris Hoy Velodrome, which as a result of meant that basically in this kind of a whole area there was like Athletes Village, this is the Athletes Village, Athletes Village being developed, a lot of demolition happening, lots of kind of large scale top-down infrastructural projects which looked at this kind of particular neighborhood around the stadium on the scale of 5-10 years in terms of mapping out the future to come. And obviously that's fine if you're working in an office and you're not living in the neighborhood, and especially not if you're growing up there, because it essentially meant that for the kids on this particular estate in Dalmarnock, your only provision that is made in the urban landscape for you specifically is this. And really you're just surrounded by kind of multiple processes of disempowering change, like hoarding. You have no idea what's going on. There's no kind of access to knowledge or a sense of particular ownership of space. And so we wanted to try and create somewhere that could challenge that. And we became more and more interested in the kind of adventure playground movement, and have established now, very recently received charitable status, which is incredible, and employs 5 part-time staff and another 4 part-time staff running a nursery program from there. The organization's been designed in a way so that it is, in as much as it can be, child-led. So there's meetings on site with the kids. They give feedback in terms of what they want to be changing on site. The development of the whole project has been done in a way that meant that it was phased construction, so that the kids always knew what was going on and what was happening, and everything was visible, and they could see every part of the process. And yeah, so I mean, as Audrey said, these 3 projects are things that we have ongoing involvement in. So for Baltic Street, there's 2 of us who still sit on the board, and then now we're going to try and turn this into an annual thing where a bunch of us go up and build some of the things that the kids can't build themselves, so sort of basic infrastructure under the guidance of them, which then they can continue to edit and develop. Yeah, that's the 3 projects. So essentially, in the other room, what you will find is a kind of catalogue of really generous contributions of content from people who are involved in the projects. We have original artworks that people have made, sound recordings, films, t-shirt designs, and yeah, it's really interesting, especially for us, to kind of to hear back from other people in sometimes a more or less indirect way, about what is important to them about their experience of these projects that we talk about. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy the exhibition.
I think that's it from us.
So thanks. As anticipated, I'm going to present to this roundtable Stefano Ragazzo from Orizzontale. Stefano is one of the founders of the group, the collective Orizzontale, that is made by Stefano, Juan Lopez Cano, Giuseppe Grant is something here, Margherita Manfra also here, Nasrin Mohiti Asli, Roberto Pantaleoni, Stefano. And Orizzontale works on public space. They are interested in public space, works on political engagement. Their works reflect political engagement. Their structure are based on horizontal structure, so the collective and how to share decision in order to submit and present projects. They won in 2014 the IAP Maxi edition in Rome with 8.5, and they won in 2016 Prossima Apertura. One of the public space project was a competition run by the MIBACT, the Ministry of Heritage of Italy, for recovering the outskirts of the metropolitan areas of Italy. They were one of the 5 selected areas. So Stefano is one of our discussants, and I'm going to give the microphone to him in order to start this round table. Thanks.
Thanks, Simone. Thanks, first of all, for inviting us tonight, and thanks for the inspiring presentation. I'm super happy to be here because actually Orizzontale Assemble were born in 2009, 2010, so we were pretty close. And in 2013, we curated an exhibition in Rome called Public Space on Demand, where we collect experience from all over Europe about these new practices of doing architecture. And we exhibit the Cinelorium. I think it was the first time that the work of Assemble was in Rome. So it's good after 5 years to see how things did evolve and what's happening and what's the future. So I'll do a quick general reflection about the 3 works that are going to be exhibited tonight. And the first one is just, I will sum up the work, not saying that it is a design process or a design approach, it's more like acting. So it's make things happen. So I'll just pick 3 ways of acting. Those are fit with the 3 projects. So it's shifting, layering, and collaborating. So let's start with shifting. I think it's something common in our generation to approach to the work life, also to approach as inhabitants to the daily life, to shifting the point of view. So in a way, we shifted the point of view to understand which role the architect need to have in a contemporary city. And I think that Assemble starts with a very specific point. It sounds like a simple question, but they just started with the question, what design could do to create a better environment. I know it sounds super simple, but it wasn't. If the design of the city was driven by this principle, we wouldn't have so many contradictions in our city. So I think it's one of the characteristics of the Assemble project. So inhabiting the city became a tool. Inhabiting became also a way of shaping the environment of the city. And I think this will create a network connection between inhabitants and spaces. It can be like house, can be work environment, can be everything. But I think this is one of the way to moving forward the mechanicistic approach of the modern movement of the contemporary city, with just paying what have been done in the last 70 years to our city. So I think this way of assemble of inhabiting spaces to shaping the environment is one of the antidote to the contemporary city. And this links to more ancestral way of approaching to the space. I think in this era of post-Anthropocene, it's good, and it's a good way to create a non-anthropocentric way of approaching to space. Like Auto Cafe, it's not just sustainable. It's a way of thinking about the reproductive city cycle of the city. So material that was there, we're using the same place to create another architecture, and maybe in 5 years they will be dismantled and used for other things. So I think this is pretty important to look in our era. The second act is layering. It is no more about designing project, but it's a design process. This process allows a product and the space to fit better with the community that will live there. So, and it gives you the opportunity to shape it afterwards on the modified needs. So it's good to talk about process instead of project and design. And the fact that also the process has no prescribed outcome. So every time I can see like auto project, also the Baltic playground doesn't have a precise outcome. It's a daily outcome from the Eastern community that is living the space. And this goes direct to the last act. This is collaborating and hands-on a practice. This is pretty close to what we do as well. And this gives a more practical way of seeing the complete process of the production of something. In the era of Amazon, click and buy, and just you receive something, the fact that you see the whole process and the fact that you give value of the whole process is something that in Assemble, also in Gramsci, it's something that people that is part of the project consider and take the best out of it. So that's, I think it's three of the themes that I wanted to highlight about the three projects that were shown tonight.
I suggest, if you want, I have some questions for you, but maybe you can, if you want to say something or to answer, should be nice in order to. Would you like?
I mean, I have a question, a specific question if you want to.
It's okay, also a discussion, so please.
Yeah, it's really nice to have this as, I wasn't expecting this as like a sort of response to the work. It's really nice, really sensitive. I mean, perhaps I misunderstood, but I think it's really, really nice way to start discussion rather than just saying question. But I'm still processing it. I don't know, Fran, if you have something direct.
I think it's interesting the themes that you choose to describe, because when I was like reading up on your practice, I think, you know, say things, but we just use maybe slightly different words. And I wonder sometimes about, I think you can kind of shape a lot of arguments about themes relating to kind of to semantics, but really it's about narrative, like it's about trying to build a certain kind of attitude or politics in a direction or something, and like that it's, I feel like you could have also chosen like many other words, and that they would have also been really wonderful to hear and also really sensitive. It's like, I think it's interesting because it is essentially, sometimes the words are they're kind of not very helpful or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, well.
I mean, obviously they are helpful. That's lovely. Do you know?
Yeah. I think the fact of having like a narrative approach on the process, on the design process, is pretty important also, because if some spots, some area doesn't have that kind of semantic layering of memories, places, and persons and stories, I think creating also this new narrative gives the chance to the place to be more like a better place to live for the people. And that's about that. I would ask you something about Granby. It is in Liverpool. It has a pretty specific condition around. There was a pretty strong community working on that. And on the other side, you're London-based. So, and London, it's a lot is going on. In the last year and a half, we heard about the pseudo public space. Corporate are buying space all around. And some architects declared that it was better to build and privatize on Hyde Park. So it's something strong is happening over there. Do you expect the same project happening in London as well? And how London is influence your practice in a way?
We're entirely a product of the time and our environment, and London is a really difficult place to work because land value is so high, developments like so rapacious. But in another sense, obviously, there's a lot of money and a lot of opportunity, and not that we get a lot of money, but I mean ways of accessing funding and like there's energy there, and there's like a kind of critical mass of people and activities and interests that means that that things can kind of fire off each other, and there's just like so many overlaying activities that it's working in a void. We're working in many complex networks of people, and and also can access knowledge and like resources. In terms of the first project, the Cinerolium, we had no idea how to do those curtains, and it was really through like going to one place that makes all the curtains for the West End, and then them referring us to another theatrical chandler, a guy who like supplies all the set like materials to build sets, and him and his manager came and helped us like hang and rig all the pulley systems, and that was just like out of their own interest in the project, and like the fact that they were in the city and like had this amazing knowledge and set of resources was really the only way that it happened, and therefore we exist. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think just to say as well, my sort of perspective of Assemble as a relatively new recruit is that we're quite reactive. So it's not to say that people don't go out there and search for things, but we do spend a lot of time reacting to opportunities that come to us and being opportunistic in a way and really making most of what comes to us, but also because there's 17 plus people, it's really amazing. Can you hear me? I think it's dropping out a bit. Anyway, let me know if you can't hear. I think it's amazing to be in a position where you have 17 people who have their own networks. So I think it means that Assemble is quite lucky in that we do get a lot sort of that comes to us, which means that we spend a lot of time sort of evaluating those sorts of things. Yeah.
I have a pair of questions for you. So, looking at your presentation, you started from Goldsmith and arrived to the playground. So, and you started with first installation project, right? With Cinerolium and so on. So there's something very specific about our generation. Also, if I have 2 years, I'm not millennial for 2 years, it's okay. But I'm speaking about the year of the offices, okay? And in the globalization, we have a lot of opportunity, like temporary architecture, starting from the program of Young Architect Program in MUMA, set up maybe 15 years, 20 years ago. And this model became a sort of model to select new architects all over the world. And this is a common story to for a lot of firms. Among us, it's a common story too. But what is interesting in your work, I think it is very specific from you, is that you moved from ephemeral arriving to architecture. The Goldsmith is a real architecture and very powerful client, And from the other side, you continue working with a political engagement. So I'm working with ephemeral. So I would like if you would speak a little bit about this condition to work sometimes for the promoters of changing of the city. And this is both sense, both gentrification, both providing new art center or infrastructure, because complexity need infrastructure. And from the other side, working with the communities. So first question is, what's your engagement in between this ephemeral condition and the architectural work in a more common sense, how we are used to think about. And second question is about how you take decision, because you are a lot of people, and so I'm curious to know what's the backstory behind your decision, because a lot of us decided to started with this sort of political engagement, then decided to have this sort of political progressive approach in our thought, and then verifying the possibility to realize an ethical work, but maybe renouncing in this way you work, also reflecting the separation between intellectual and manual, if we want to speak from a philosophic point of view. And you do not work on this separation. You try to come back every time to also horizontally to this sort of condition of rejoin together the two conditions of warfare. So sometimes it works, sometimes you have to deal with complexity. So what is the second question is, what is the relationship between working with complexity and working with the separation, if we want to speak about philosophy, Marxist separation between intellectual and handmade works. So this is one of the points of...
That was a lot of questions. Well, maybe I'll start and then I'll try to answer some of them and then on it maybe. So maybe just comment about your first question. I don't know if I understood 100% correctly, but Fran and I were actually just talking about when we were preparing for the talk. Assemble is quite well known for a lot of the temporary, more self-initiated projects like the Cineroleum, Folly for a Flyover, that sort of thing. I wonder whether that is because of the time at which they were working and that sort of thing. But we're now at a point where we have goldsmiths built, which is very exciting. So it will be interesting to see whether now that the public has seen that we can build something a little bit more serious maybe, whether that sort of changes the trajectory. But just to go back to the sort of idea of opportunism, a lot of those self-initiated temporary projects, they manifested as they did because that was that the collective were working within. And say, for example, Fran was talking a bit about Otto and how that was built by volunteers. That made sense at the time, but for example now we all pay ourselves a wage, so we would have to think very carefully if we were going to build something why we would use volunteer labour, for example. Obviously it was a very different time at that time and people were not necessarily paying themselves. So I guess that's something to think about is yeah, maybe it's not an answer to your question, but sometimes you work in such a way because that is what is available to you. Yeah. And in regards to the way that Assemble works, there is a lot of action, but there's definitely a lot of talking. A lot of sort of prescribed meetings and sort of structures. So we have a management group. So on a sort of rolling basis, you have to, I don't want to say serve time, but I think that's how some people probably see it. You have to spend a few months at a time taking on a sort of more managerial role. So that means that we always have a few people who have oversight of the practice. And also, as Fran mentioned earlier, we have a buddy system. So we usually have 2 people leading on a project, and collective authorship comes through design meetings, a weekly sort of working group meeting that we have, and various other sort of structures. But it's taken quite a while to get to that point, and I can only speak from the recent past. But just to say as well, it might be interesting to know that I was employed about 1.5 years specifically to manage the office, to be an office manager, but also to help run Sugar House. But I've obviously sort of exploited that a little bit, and now here I am. So that maybe gives you a little bit of an indication of how Assemble works. It is very nice and open in a way. And also, just to say, Karim, who does our finances, he's been around for quite some time and is a partner in the company, but he has a really strong interest in music and nightlife, so he'll also contribute to those projects, maybe not necessarily just looking at the financial side of things. But maybe I'll pass on to Fran to build upon that.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Audrey. I'm just going to talk, and some of it will relate, hopefully. Yeah, you were talking about opportunism and also temporary projects. And I think that we are opportunistic in terms of how we react to projects coming up, but also we are very explicitly opportunistic within the projects and the nature of the scope of the work that we're asked to do. We try and really push or like leverage the kind of cultural capital that we have accrued to do things which are meaningful in the context in which we're working, for example, using the Turner Prize, which is essentially a kind of PR exercise for modern art, organised by the Tate annually, to try and start start a business that could create meaningful employment in that neighbourhood. And I think, yeah, temporary projects were, they're kind of a means to an end. That was like really, I think, and probably the same for you, is like really all you have access to when you're trying to do your own thing. It's like to do a permanent building obviously is much more stringent in terms of like building control and regulations, but also in terms of money, and it's just like not feasible to start doing that unless you have some insane patronage, which is not the way that architecture works anymore, generally. And what was the second question? It was about the how we take decisions. Well, I mean, yeah, we vote. Yeah, we vote.
Marxism.
Intellectual works, handling works, volunteer. Yeah, you have answered a little bit about it.
I mean, I don't really know how to answer that other than to say that I think the work isn't just the projects that we get contracted to do. The work is like how we organize ourselves, how we choose to speak to one another, how we eat, how we, how we work at every level. And I think that it's all very intertwined, and it isn't, so in answer, there is no distinction.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're talking about opportunity, because I think the biggest change from the previous generation to our generation is the fact that we don't have actual real opportunity. So the previous generation was allowed to experiment, to research with client, let's say, with an economic system that was work, let's say, properly, but it wasn't work properly as we are seeing now. So the fact that we self-initiative stuff means this is our research lab, let's say. So that's why we shift the point of view on that. And I would say that also, I think our generation also did the step to not divide the ephemeral from real architecture. Now, talking about process, I think ephemeral is just a piece inside the process. So it can be like a huge process of just ephemeral stuff. That's architecture. I mean, from my point of view, I don't know if for your point of view as well. And I think that's another step forward from what architecture is about from the point of view of our generation. How we take decision, it's always a mess, like you can imagine from a collective, but we tend to be more structured. We actually, a few years ago, we defined the Monday breakfast. So it's like we brought food and talk about, but then we just eating food. So we said the morning breakfast wasn't the right things, but yeah. And then so we do like we use brainstorming, and then we split in groups because doing a design process is more than 2, 3, 4 persons. It's crazy. Like it's not about it's round. It's square. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. I say like work collection doesn't mean that you take decision with an assembly, say you want it red, you want it blue. It's not about that. So it's more about sharing every time, constantly, the result. And this is maybe part of our post-ideological generation. So we are way more pragmatic than that. So that's why we go back and forward from practice to intellectual, from practice to intellectuals, because we experiment directly on site. That's maybe the difference from the previous generation that had this strong knowledge and ideological push. I don't feel like having now, like more like trying to do things.
I have a reflection while you were speaking. I was reflecting that Rome is one of the capital was the ephemeral as born in the 70s with the famous Estate Romana. The idea, but there the idea of the ephemeral is completely the opposite. The idea was to call the best architect to try out the capability of a piece of the city. So to try to have trials, to try what a piece of the city is able to afford. So try the transformation of the city through the ephemeral. Right now, you were speaking about the opposite. And the younger architects were realizing first buildings, not speaking about how the city could be transformed through little trials by festivals or little how installations working on public space can change or reshape a portion of city. Instead, our generation started, I continue to say in the generation, decided to work, had the opportunity to work, and you are right when you say it's an opportunistic approach, and a reactive approach. To you, the first occasion is the ephemeral to demonstrate the capability to afford and to manage complexity. So art, public space, political engagement, and so on. And from this point of view, this is my question for you. In Granby, you demonstrate you are able to afford or to front the complexity of an urban master plan. So you share through this project an idea of a possible city, how to involve community into a higher condition of life without substituting the community already inhabiting that space. So the question is, would you like to, but these sort of fields are fields that are difficult to reach because dimension of technical and economical requirements that in Europe the administrations ask to the professionals. So if you feel comfortable with the urban scale, and what do you think, if you like this kind of work on urban scale, what you would like to work in the next project if you could, apart of be reactive and be opportunistic in this sense of you. So what is right now your next field of interest?
Yeah, we're a group of individuals, and so everyone has different ambitions for what we should or might or could be doing it in the next 10 years or however long we continue to exist. And yeah, I think the thing about working at an urban scale or master planning, if that's more specific, it's I think the thing about working in Granby is that it wasn't about trying to improve the life. Well, it wasn't about trying to improve the lives of those people who already lived there. It was about trying to improve the conditions in which they were already living really valuable lives, and to be able to respect that in the way that we develop the projects and listen in like a meaningful way. Yeah, I don't know about the future.
Yeah, as Fran said, when you have 17 people, we have some. Yeah, it's obviously we have some shared values, but we don't. It's impossible for us to sort of write a manifesto or anything like that. And if you ask anyone, they have a slightly different perspective. But I mean, there are some people who are really into like large-scale architectural work, and if it was possible, I think they would go for it. But we have the voting system, so yeah, it happens that more sort of decisions are made collectively.
Yeah, we have some other questions from. I do my role of people building. Okay, I have a mic. Lucia, that's another one.
Well, it might not be very diplomatic, so it might not be very diplomatic, my question, but you keep touching on this. Would it be possible to just tell us a little bit about, would it be possible, it's not working there, I don't think. Oh, it is, nearer, to work, to tell us a bit about the projects you're going to be working on in the next year. In other words, you've successfully changed scale. We're all aware of that. I mean, Goldsmith is incredible, but which way are future projects taking you? I know Simone keeps sort of pushing you on that, but might it be possible to say something about what's happening in the next year?
I would like to know if there are any space or any possibility for temporary architecture now in London. Or maybe I reverse the question, asking if you can sell your skill for local communities and for also for the public sector, for the in a context that you know better than me, local authorities have no money at all. So maybe you can help the local authorities to somehow give more importance to the green spaces and other important aspects. In terms, I think one of the most interesting characteristics of your is your commitment in the public sector somehow. Each of your projects describe and try to put in evidence abandoned space and transform this abandoned space immediately in space, in active space. So can you somehow give your skills to the public sector?
Other questions?
I have a really simple question, especially after all the words I've been hearing about process, community, ephemeral. I really love the word between, especially among Italians, but especially among Romance architects. I would like to ask a simple question. Because for me it was not quite evident, and I'm curious, which are the architects that are fundamental for your daily practice? And especially, if they are, and especially who are the British architects that are fundamental for your practice?
It's an interview of work. Thanks. Okay, other questions? Last question, then we have.
I have a question for Fran. You said, something eloquent, I can't quite remember exactly, but something like, we're not trying to make people's lives better, but trying to make the space around their lives better, or something like that. You said it more eloquently. But I think it's a really interesting ideology, which is quite a new one for architects. I think we've been quite... there's a lot of grand ideologies surrounding architecture, and this is a much more humble approach, which I think is really taken a lot of ground recently. And I wonder if you think it is replicable, if you think it's something that every architecture practice should be doing, or it should be the aim for a certain percentage of architecture to work in this way, in this much more open more open way.
So we have the last 8 minutes, okay? So if we are, so if we delay 10, so please.
Well, I'll take Marina's question. We do kind of avoid these questions because we do, as much as we often have work in the pipeline, it tends to, I mean, I don't know what it's like with other practices, but we do definitely work at a lot of different scales. So, for example, I'm helping someone at the moment on editing a book, so that sort of scale. But I don't know if we've necessarily yet seen the sort of fruits of goldsmiths. I think it might take a little bit longer, but we, for example, are sort of in a couple of competition processes, more larger scale work in Belgium and France at the moment, but we don't know yet whether that will come to be. So I better not mention what it is because I don't want to get in trouble. But we're doing a whole range of things. So we're working on the redevelopment of an academy school quad. So it's kind of more of a landscaping project, so relatively small scale. I think Fran is working on Oslo. Are you working on Oslo? You don't want me to talk about it? No. Something in Oslo, a mystery project. Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's... Sorry, I'm in trouble now. But yeah, I mean, we have people with very diverse interests, so yeah. It's a terrible answer to your question, but can you answer it better, Fran? Yeah. Well, I guess to say, like, the ambition, I think, maybe not everyone would agree, but I think there is a wider ambition that we would have some larger scale projects. So some architecture, large scale, so like I'm sure we'd love to have a larger public or a housing type project, but we're also very interested in more workspace development projects. So we do have a few of those, again, in the pipeline, but none quite confirmed. So I think ideally we would like to have a few larger projects and then a sort of mix of smaller scale projects to also just to keep everyone engaged and interested, because there are some people that maybe aren't particularly interested in working on architecture projects. So yeah, sorry. Hopefully that answers it in some way. And Fran can have the other 3 questions.
Okay. Okay, so quickly, it's easy to talk about architectural practices who influence in the UK. People, I think, have worked at and have also been taught by 6A, Carissa St. John, and Muff, I would say, are like the key ones. In terms of whether all architects should act with some sense of social responsibility and respect for people's lives, I think yes. Obviously we don't do that in all our projects to the same extent that we did in Granby, and it's just about having it as a priority, but being able to realize it to different extents, and trying to be imaginative in how you apply that set of values to the way that you're working in the world. And that's also in like the attitude you take to like going to meetings or like having conversations with people versus like how you structure a methodology of delivering a project. I mean, it's just, I think, yeah, 100% as like everyone. I mean, it's obviously just hard because like we work in a way where we have minimal hierarchy, and obviously a lot of people working in architecture are not in that situation. But I think it's just about like working in within the constraints that you have, in the best way you can. And then in relation to community, okay, I think the woman who asked the question has gone, so, oh no, you've moved places. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there is an appetite for the kind of work that we're doing, obviously that's why we're here. It doesn't necessarily mean that local authorities are always interested in trying to seek out difficult answers, or like people don't really want to talk about complexity. People want simple ways of doing things that are risk averse and like go with like proven track records and like sound financing and good returns. And I think that actually like financial structures and political culture is like a major obstacle in terms of like doing community-led projects and like the kind of work which we're really interested in. For instance, especially with like austerity, because local authorities have a responsibility at the moment to make, to sell any property or land that they own, make good on that in terms of like getting as close as they can for market value, because but if the value of the site was tied to its use rather than its like property value, then that would be a way of trying to make an argument that isn't just bound up in finance, especially in the context of London. That's a kind of deadly situation. But yeah, I mean, the mayor's office the mayor Sadiq Khan is trialing some projects that look to try and alter that, but we don't know, we don't know how long they'll be in power for, and we don't know whether they'll be successful, and it really depends about changing policy in terms of like the pressures on local authorities, but I don't know. Yeah, I think that's everything. Do you have any final things? Yeah, no. Things you want to say?
Yeah, I think that's I think you share the same view for the future. Now we're struggling with bringing into a public commission our way of doing ephemeral architecture. So we're pushing the rules in a way. So I think that's next goal of our way of practicing. It's to understand how to make it fit to a more long-term process. So it's something that after the experimentation, how to make it happen in other places with different conditions, because it's good and it's, let's say, much easier when there is a strong community, and so you just ask by them for giving new tools to the community. But some other time, like in new part of the city, when the community is not strong, which tool should you use? Which kind of experiment? How long should it take? So it's another big field of research, I guess.
If you want to answer, maybe last answer, then we...
No, I think it was an answer.
I just wanted to again mention that Daniel and Uta will be performing in the exhibition for the next little bit. As Simone said, it's a one-night only thing, so enjoy. And also thank you very much to British School at Rome and everyone for having us, Marina especially. I'm looking at you. Yes. And thank you to everyone. Thank you.